Welcome everyone to yet another The Scandalous Delights. Doo-doo-doo-doo. What are we going to uncover this week? Stay tuned for more with the very special guest, Diva Diaz. Yay!
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So, Diva, I know we were talking about this before, but if you were to introduce yourself a bit scandalously, what would that be?
Well, when we were talking, you asked me, what's scandalous about you? And I was like, nothing. Everything that I do, I think, is normal, which
Yeah.
is probably a bit weird.
It is a bit scandalous because anything, everything that you do is not normal. I've seen you in action and it is not. I mean, even the area. So you, for everyone out there in the world listening to this, Diva is an amazing facilitator of consciousness. And what she does is invites you to more of you, like from this whole space of looking at yourself and looking at everything that you be and do and choose from a space of what was the strongness in that rather than the wrongness and really stepping into more seeing the difference that you are. And I've been, for lack of any other word, following you, but like seeing what you've been creating in the world and also been at the receiving of it. And it's just amazing the space that you're willing to be. And so one of the specialty classes of access consciousness that you created with Gary Douglas is X-Men. So and these are the movies, and that's one of the inspiration for starting this podcast because I was looking at what would I really like to create. Like I reached that space where I was like, I can just continue just creating things on autopilot. Like you do, you change and you create, start creating different things, and then you find yourself again in that space of comfortable, like we were talking before. And and I was looking at what is it that I really want to create? Like what is it that what would I like my voice to be in the world? And
Mm,
what can I invite and create? And I was looking at that and I got this sense of that, how there, one is for sure conversations of possibilities. Like, I used to hang out with people who would just always be talking about the problems they have, and I would just get so bored or lose. But I thought that I had to be present with all of that, listen to everything
yeah.
that's going on, and then in that whole sense, make it real, and then be more at the effect of it rather than always knowing, oh, like none of this might be real. What of this is actually true and real? And that's a totally different conversation. So
Yeah.
I would love, yeah, so this was one of the things that I wanted to create a platform where we can actually talk about the magic and the miracle and the possibilities, not from like this esoteric place of, we don't, or like this space of a magic
Yeah.
trick is where you throw the cards and then you know which card it is, but from a totally different space of as simple as what you can ask for and
Yeah.
what's possible for you, which is so different.
Yeah.
Uh,
I love that. And I love what you said too about sorry, I just have like the light, the morning light just
it's
shining
lovely.
into
I'm
one
loving
eye.
it.
It's like my laser eye. Um, but
I'm loving it.
what you were saying about how we think that if we're just like listening to someone's problems or we're just talking about the problem, we think somehow that that's helpful, or that that is being present, or even that that's going to solve it, or that that's being nice and kind. And we don't realize it very often. That's just allowing the same thing to stay in place, which has a level of comfort to it that we think is uncomfortable, but actually it isn't. We love it. We literally love it. Like, we love the heck out of it. Like, we can't get enough. Like, we just want more and more and more of it. Why? Because it puts us solidly in that position that we know so well, and actually stepping outside of that and going, do you know what? This is a story I've been telling myself for so long about how I can't do this, or how this is so terrible, or how this is so difficult, or this is impossible. That's so, so comfortable to sit in that same feeling, that same emotion. But what might be just one step beyond it? Doesn't need to be that you've got to do the entire opposite of that, but just one step beyond it. Just shift your perspective a little bit, as though you're sitting in a different chair in the room, not always the same one. Like, just shift what you're looking at. And I think that is something, that is actually pretty scandalous, because it takes a level of courage. And if you propose that to people, they're very, very quick to shoot you down, usually, and saying that you're telling them that they're wrong in what they're doing, when you're not. It's actually just opening up a different possibility. But it's so not something that we're taught, that is even possible, that it becomes just like, what are you saying to me?
Yeah, or like making the points of views that we've been brought up around or we've heard so much, making them so real. Like, I find it so interesting. I have this funny story where when I was a little girl, I had this cousin. I used to live in this small town called Chandigarh, and I had this cousin who had a friend who was a translator. So she knew French, and she was traveling all over France translating.
Wow.
And this was like years and years ago, when we didn't have Google, we didn't have computers, we didn't have phones. We only had landline where you dialed the number like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, well, you had to like pull the cord as far as it would go.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, oh, someone from the village has gone traveling outside the country, sort of scenario. And then she came back, and I remember like some of the curious us like got together, all of us sitting in our drawing room and listening to her stories one after the other. And I remember her telling us about, which was very scandalous, for everyone in the family, because she was telling us about how in France she had cheese that they waited for it to grow fungi. So, and that was a delicacy. Like, they wanted.
And you're like, you left the village for that.
No, and we're like that in our home at that point. Like, if anything got like fungus, even for like even a speck, was like thrown away because you didn't eat it. It got spoiled. Yeah. So it was such a different point of view. And even though, and like she told us with like all that, the joy of eating it and enjoying it, that made me realize that everything at that point, that everything that I was making and thinking is real, or like the points of views, that they are the only points of views. Like, my whole world changed, because I was like, oh, there are other points of views that exist.
Yeah.
There are other things and other diversification that exist that goes beyond my family's points of view.
Yeah.
And but I remember everyone sitting there and going, what? Disgusting? Like, who will eat that? Or like, and I was like, wow, that just opened the door for me at that particular point. I remember just sitting there and going, I've got to explore the world.
Yeah. But how cool, because in that moment, like, you could have chosen lots of things, but there's always this like moment where you can choose to stay in what you know, or go into the curiosity of it. Like, oh wow, I don't know if I would eat that. And I'm not saying that's bad or good or great, but that's really different, which is what you did. And I think that's the thing that most people don't realize, that we choose our points of view. They're not just like bestowed upon us and put into our minds, and then that's our programming system, the end, that you have to deal with, work around, overcome. Like, you get to choose them every day. And I think that is the challenging thing, because we're not taught how to choose them. That's something that you've got to discover by yourself.
Oh, I would love for you to say more about that. Like, so how does one start getting a sense of that they have choice and start choosing it?
Yeah, well, I think that the thing with choices, what I've noticed for me personally, I used to think that you had to believe in yourself in order to choose something. But I've never believed in myself before I chose something. No. I never, Like, and I also never knew what the heck I was doing before I did it. Like, not once. Sorry, anybody who's ever interviewed me for a job, if you're watching this, whatever I said was probably a rather elaborate, elaborate thing to get the job, but I didn't actually know what I was doing. But I think that, like I remember being kind of fresh out of university and going for my first job, which later evolved into business intelligence, which is what I used to do before I started, working with Access, the company, and being a facilitator. And I remember at the time, like having everybody who was applying for this job, or all my colleagues and stuff, they were so well educated, and like their parents were like, the finance minister of Belgium and the blah, blah, blah. And I was just like, great, I'm like a peasant on the street. Like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't even know like anything. But I realized then that all I had to do was just choose it. Like, all I had to do was go, well, if they can, I don't know if I can, but I could just try. And so that was enough of a different point of view for me to be able to actually succeed very quickly and even outcreate a lot of those people, because even though they were so successful already before starting, which put them kind of here, not all of them had that level of curiosity, like, oh, what if I could do more? Like, what if I could be more creative? Like, but for me, it was kind of a blessing to not feel like I could do it, because I wasn't in the comfort zone of feeling comfortable, like I've got this. I was never comfortable. In fact, I never had a comfortable day in that job, not once. Every day I was like, oh my goodness, what did I get myself into? How am I gonna go and have this conversation with this president of this country for 2 hours about the economy? Like, what was I thinking? So every day I had to step up, but I had to be in question. And that was the thing that took me from the safety of the, I want to say like the comfortable, I'm going to fail, doubt, fear, into, okay, all of that is still there, but I'm going to add a little bit of something else, which is this possibility that I might be able to turn this around. I might be able to, I don't know, do a good job here. And so that was always done by asking the question, which is the way to really explore different points of view. Because we also tend to think that if we have a very fixed point of view, then we're right. And I tried that too, and I failed miserably. Even in conversation, if you want to have a very fixed point of view, you're kind of stuck. Like, I would try that in meetings, and then they would ask me questions about it, and I couldn't go further because I was so stuck in that position. I couldn't like elaborate, and it didn't allow me the intelligence to actually see all the other perspectives required for that meeting or for that negotiation. So there's a certain fluidity, I think, that comes with that is with being able to choose your own point of view, but knowing that it's not real, like you're saying, knowing that it doesn't mean that's not valid, but knowing that that's the point of view for that moment, but it could change at any moment.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, there were so many places, so many things that you could go to. It's like, it's also the willingness to know that you'll always ask for more.
Yeah.
Like when you were saying that, like, I just sort of kind of acknowledged that a bit about myself as well. Because like, if I'm doing the same thing again and again, I think I'm like, that's boring. And like I'm already done. Like, I remember looking at my business at one point, and it's expanding and growing, but I looked at like my life for the next 40, 50 years, and I was like, oh my goodness, is it going to be just more of the same? I rather die now. And that's when Access showed up, because I was like, there's got to be more than just what I've been told that is what life is supposed to be. So you touched upon like I love that you said like you're constantly creating beyond and always looking at what's different. Like one way to look at it from, okay, no, wait, I have a question for you. Have you ever lied in your resume?
No.
Really?
Yeah, no. But I have you?
Yes.
Really? No, but I only discovered this a few years ago. I only realized who's gonna check up on this and know what university I went to. Like, I mean, I went to a very good university. I got a good grade and stuff. And yeah, but it only occurred to me in the last couple of years that I could have lied all along.
Because the way you've been choosing more, I'm like, yeah, some point.
No, but I always had a bit of in the UK we call it like a wheeler dealer attitude, a bit like, I'll sell you anything. Like I can be anything, I can do
Yeah.
anything, kind of thing,
Yeah,
just because it's fun, And so many people are like, oh, like, oh, well, you're such a jack of all trades. And I'm like, really? Then why am I good at all of them? Like that's not being a
yeah.
jack of all trades.
And I might be pulling it out of your head.
Exactly.
All the information that's required. Yeah, because
Exactly.
that's like we don't even realize that we're being that so many times that you're pulling thoughts from other people's heads. But if you're
Yeah.
willing to be present with, you can actually play with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great way to create, and we think that we have to that's wrong, or we have to like learn it all in advance, but you don't. You just need to tap into that area, tap into that conversation, tap into that thing. It's like information is around us everywhere,
Yeah.
and it's so easy to go, I don't know, as this kind of automatic reflex. I don't know. Well, have you even asked? Like, what do I remember about this? Yeah, that's one way you can scandalously get things that you want.
Scandalously tickled everyone just now with that. You can ask questions. We will get Diva again to respond to them.
I thought you were saying to me, I was like, yeah, good. I'll do that today, actually.
So I was like talking to all the listeners and the watchers.
The
You
future
can ask
audience would like
questions.
it.
Yep. I have another question. As acceptable. So what do you mean by X-Men?
So X-Men is something fabulous and amazing that I discovered when I came across the Access Consciousness material, and it was created by Gary Douglas and Dane Here. They're the founders, and it was kind of this branch of all of the material that already exists that spoke to the people that are just like the absolute misfits. Like and a lot of which will have been labeled with things like autism spectrum disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, attention deficit disorder, all these disorders.
Yeah.
But it turns it on its head, and it actually looks at the capacity, but not in the way, not like, I love what you said at the beginning of this podcast, where it was like, this isn't to kind of like make it all esoteric. And it's not like, oh, my kid like cannot function, oh, he, that must be great. It's not about that. It's not about like kind of oversimplifying it to try and make something right that is challenging. It's actually about really recognizing that these people do function in a very different way, with the way that they receive information, with the way that they communicate, the way that they think. Like a lot of them will think in pictures, and I've always thought in pictures, and I just assumed that everyone else did too. So when I started to discover little pieces like this, a lot of my life that hadn't made sense before started to make sense. Like even a lot of the meetings that I'd had in my previous job in business intelligence, I was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's why I could never remember really the words that were being said. But if I pictured the office and the setting, then suddenly all of that would come to life, and I would be able to recall everything. And so different things that started to make my life easy as I discovered them about myself. And it's just this amazing, amazing set of tools that allow you to have a lot more like conscious awareness of how it is that you function, and also how to communicate and engage with people who are X-Men. And the name is affectionately given to them because if you know the X-Men films and comics, they are people who are incredible. They have these amazing superpowers, but they all think they're messed up. and society tells them that they're freaks and that they're weirdos and they need to, like, be kind of locked away. But this is really about bringing out those capacities so that you can actually start to have these people be a lot more independent and empowered, actually, and have them stop feeling that they're so wrong just by who they are, which they don't have a lot of examples of to relate to, because most people are neurotypical and they are not, they are neurodivergent. So it's really about embracing that and celebrating that.
Yes. And what a gift to have that in the world. Because I remember the first X-Men class that I attended, I was like, oh my goodness, my whole life makes sense now. And it went from like being at the effect of it, at the effect of the awareness and the effect of what I was choosing, to actually being able to, like, sort of catapulted me to this space of where I could use it to create. Like, as simple as an example, that when I was working, like before I found X-Men or Access Consciousness, was I would constantly make myself wrong because I had a million things open on my computer or things that were going on, and I would constantly try and narrow it down just to feel like, why can't I like work like other people, like start a presentation, finish the presentation, then move on to the next. I could never do one thing and then move
That's why. That's the most difficult thing to do. Who can even do things in a linear way? I have never been able to either.
Exactly. And I remember, like, when the first time I heard that, I was like, I could breathe, because I was like, oh my goodness, I just can't breathe and use the way I create to actually create rather than constantly look at. Like, now it's so much easier for me because I can just jump from one to the other and like be more present and more aware with multiple things, which is actually way more easier and more fun.
Yeah, and so much more freeing as well, to not have to do things the way that we think we should, just actually for no logical reason other than a lot of other people are doing it that way. And so, the gift in that is really embracing like everyone's uniqueness. But one thing that to me I find fascinating and I actually thoroughly enjoy is that everybody for whom this applies thinks it doesn't apply to them. So
yeah, like the title of this podcast.
Exactly. Everything I do,
someone who facilitates exactly.
Totally.
If anyone has that going on for you, this one is for you. You're welcome.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it applied to me for 2 whole years, and Gary would keep like prodding me about it, and I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. But actually, the cool thing is that because it's so dynamic for people who have been diagnosed, but there's also such a huge percentage of people who haven't been diagnosed because they don't present all of the symptoms, or they're very good at kind of just keeping going or functioning or whatever. And so I have worked with thousands of people who have a little bit of different elements that aren't enough for them to have it as a problem in their life, but it also doesn't create a lot of ease. And so having access to this suddenly like undoes all of those places that have been difficult, and they have like a set of tools that they can now use to make their life easier.
Yep. Cool. Yeah. And I love that you mentioned that how you used to see things visually, and like how you perceive more visually and energetically than like listening to the words. So what is it that, after how, like, so from that conversation, and I get a sense that how everyone does it differently, like how everyone engages or are part of the conversation. Like, you might be thinking everyone is listening to you, they're not. So when I would discover that, I was like, what? I've worked so hard in listening to every word that everyone says and still not getting anything. But so how could you make like engaging or with other people or interaction or communication easier for people? So how could you know what would work, and what are the ways that can be easier for people?
First thing is to start to just like go easy on yourself. Like, I think we're so quick to judge ourselves. Like, if somebody says something that doesn't really match the energy of what they're saying, or we get like a gut feeling or an intuition of like, that seems off. The first thing that I see most people do is go into self-judgment or self-criticism. That can't be right. I'm such an idiot. I always get things wrong. Why am I being so mean? Why am I not trusting again? So I think the first thing, if you start to go
I'm
easy
imagining.
exactly, I'm going crazy.
Yeah.
Like that used to be my phrase, used to be like, I'm crazy, I'm crazy, I'm crazy for everything. But very often then a couple of years down the line or a couple of weeks down the line, it would turn out that what I was aware of was actually true. And so I think just going easy on yourself and relaxing and going, okay, cool, I may be wrong, this may not be correct, that kind of like starts to dampen the voice of that inner self-critic that is the one that really gets in the way of you knowing what's true for you. And so when you actually go, all right, let me just chill out, like maybe I'm wrong, maybe that's not correct, but what do I know here? And then go into question, what do I know here? And leave it, don't try and figure it out. Like, you don't need to get all like detective about it, you know, just leave it alone. But by asking yourself that question, you've now opened up your mind, your awareness to actually have that available rather than just leaving that door closed. And that is a huge piece to actually strengthening that muscle of self-trust in what it is that you know. And it's so simple to do. And it seems like, okay, but now give me the big tool that's going to create all of it. But actually, that is one of the biggest ones, because the simple ones are the ones that will create the most dynamic change, you know. So that will start to strengthen that trust that you can have in yourself, rather than always going to doubt about whether what you're perceiving is correct or not.
And it has this freedom of not having to solve yourself or the situation like a puzzle, like that sort of, but allowing things to, okay, I'm feeling it like that. Cool.
Yeah, the relaxation.
Yeah, because solving the puzzle is more like fixing it.
100%. Fixing it, trying to control it.
So that's scandalous right there. What do you mean control it? Are we not supposed to control everything in our lives, in our relationship, and what they'll go all haywire? What are you gonna do?
Like, of course we are, but do it in a way that works. Of course, like, I'm a huge control freak, but you know, the ultimate control is actually allowance.
Yep. Okay, cool.
That is the ultimate form of control. So allowance is when you're not judging anything, and it's when you are in actual relaxation about what's occurring. It doesn't mean that you're a doormat. It doesn't mean that you just sit down and watch TV forever and just wait for your life to happen to you. But it does mean that rather than trying to go, what did that mean? What's going to happen here? So that I know what's next, so that then I can plan ahead. All of that's control, control. You're trying to control the outcome. You're trying to control how other people see you. You're trying to control the results that you get. And it's subtle, so we don't realize it, but they're all different forms of control, which is why so often life is disappointing, because you don't get to control things the way that you thought you would be able to. But if you relax and you're like, interesting point of view, what an interesting situation this is, and then go into question what else is possible here, that is actually the ultimate form of control. Because rather than playing with the little tiny puzzle pieces that don't even belong to you, so you can't really move them, you're actually allowing yourself to have this bigger picture awareness, so that the choices that you do make and the information that you receive actually can make a much bigger change, which sounds very like, you know, but when you start practicing it, it's it's dynamic.
Yep. Yeah, I'm in control.
Yeah. So many of us are control freaks. And it's not a bad thing, but it's like, you know, I realized for me, like, I would just try and just control the outcome of so many things. Like, you know, what my schedule was going to be like for the next 6 months, where I was going to be, what, you know, just so many things, like, but to the point where it was creating stress in my life. And then when I started to go, okay, well, what else is possible here? If all of this was just an interesting situation, if my schedule was just interesting, what would that be like? And what started to show up was this fluidity. So it was easier to see when things weren't going to work and be able to shift them rather than being so stuck on that has to be that way. But it was also giving some space for the things that were working to breathe more and grow even more, because I also wasn't trying to control that in the way that I knew how. And so, yeah, it's a very dynamic tool, and it's probably one for, a couple of days conversation. So just
yeah. Yeah, one of the things that I'm realizing, like even when we were talking about it, is that it's actually, we've kind of learned how to control and like how that is the way to be in over years and years and years. But it's also like I'm just realizing the more I'm allowing myself to relax, how that is so true for me. Like uh, not knowing my full day in advance is more of me. Like waking up like with this space of what's going on, what today going to be like, and is that I'm realizing how much more and more like I sort of thrive in that, and how much that is more and more of me. And when I'm looking at trying to narrow it down or focus or control, is where I'm actually being what I think I'm supposed to be. And so it's been interesting to become more present with that and see where the relaxation is, even in creation.
And that is so key. I love that you're saying this, because it's so key to the getting out of your comfort zone, because we don't realize that so much of our comfort zone is the comfort of limitation that we have, and if you're sitting there going, I will plan my day and I will do this at 11 p.m. 11 a.m. God, what am I, like some kind of lady of the night? Who knows?
I like that.
My day starts at 11 p.m. and I need like the first 12 hours at least just to kind of handle the fact that I'm awake.
You're just working in a different time zone.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what it is. But so, if you're trying to like plan everything out just so that you have a sense of achievement, I would notice that I would do that too. Like, it's so funny that you use that as an example, because even, I'm here in the UK for a little while, just visiting and, being with family again. And there was this tendency at the beginning to be like, I'm going to do this at all these different times during the day. But what that does is at the end of the day, it gives you a sense of tick the box, I did this activity, tick the box, I did the second activity. Well, what does that give you in the long term? Rather than those days where, like you're saying, you wake up and you go, what would I like to do today? There you get to actually follow the energy of whatever it is that can show up, which creates something so much greater, which is out of people's comfort zone. And it's such a simple thing, just like the planning of your day. But those are the changes that you can start to make that allow different things to show up. Somebody asked me the other day, like, oh, how is it that some people actually have so much money? And I'm like, by doing something different than everybody else. Like, it's that simple. And this is one of the ways. It's like not having to plan everything. It doesn't mean you're going around wild the whole time, just being like, I won't even plan to pay my bills. I don't need to pay my mortgage. It's not about that. But it's really, but it's allowing yourself to have that flexibility so that something new can show up. But you've got to be willing to have that discomfort of not controlling even your schedule or your meal times, or it's 6 p.m. so I've got to have dinner, or because all of that stuff just puts you in this like narrow train of thought that doesn't actually allow anything new to come in. And what if there are so many possibilities waiting to show up that if you just opened up your awareness, you'd see them instantly? What if they've been there all along, and all you have to do is actually shift your mindset to even perceive them?
Yeah. And we just changed our staff, home staff, like the maid, and she was So she comes in the morning to clean the room. And if I've had a class at night and I'm like in bed late, and she's like, come on, you're still sleeping. It's time to get up. And I'm like, don't live like my mother-in-law.
Yeah.
But I was like, I just looked at her and I just said, why I shouldn't be sleeping? And then she said, then she had to take a moment, like she took a moment to look at that, like what she was asking me, like that sort of autopilot space to going, no, there's actually nothing wrong with you sleeping at this time.
Yeah.
or being in bed at this time. But then she looked at what she wanted. She wanted to clean the room, and then that's workable. But a lot of times we give up on what's true for us. Or I remember like feeling guilty for not waking up in the morning or doing or like not having a routine, like a regular routine of. Um, but but strangely, I've always found like jobs or works or things that worked around how I worked,
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
I hear you. I hear
So,
you. And it's funny because so often when we think that we should have a routine, and a routine is beyond even the day to day. It's like by this age, I should have achieved this.
yeah,
By this, whatever, I should have this partner, this job, this house, who knows, but I mean, when we set ourselves these targets that aren't even based on what would I like, all we're doing is creating a place where we have to constantly judge ourselves as to
yeah.
where we are in relation to that goal. Like, have I got this? Am I closer to it? Am I not closer? And so all it is self-judgment, self-judgment. I mean, from the age of about maybe 17, I would set my alarm for 6 a.m. most days to go out on a run because I had decided that that's what I needed to do. I literally never went for a run at 6 a.m. And I only stopped doing this when I was about 30. It was a way that I liked
There's
to torture
hope,
myself.
people.
Exactly. And I would like trick myself. I'd put like my running shoes, I'd buy like really good running shoes, like really cute running outfits. I'd put them by the door with my phone by the door just to make myself have to
Yeah,
get up for the alarm. No trick that I did worked. Why? Because I never
yeah,
asked, do I actually want to do this? It was just a thing that
yeah.
I had decided I had to do. And it was
Which
only when
is
I stopped
which was for
torturing
like a
myself.
goal that wasn't even yours,
Exactly.
like how
It
you're
was
supposed to
never
be.
it never had anything to do with me. It was, I don't know, somebody else's great idea that worked perfectly for them. I am not a morning person. I'm never going to go for a run at 6 a.m., you know?
Yeah,
And so, but recognizing that allowed me to then get out of the judgment of myself and stop trying to torture myself into fitting into this thing. And, it seems like such a simple thing, but how much do we do that with relationships, work, even socializing, like if you don't go
yeah,
out and be social, then you don't have friends or whatever, or whatever all these crazy things are that we have to try and like fit into,
yeah.
which don't really have anything to do with what would work for us. And they're not very scandalous. They're the opposite of scandalous. They're very normal, which is great if
Yeah.
it works for you. But if you want to actually have a
Definitely.
thriving life, you need to be willing to choose what works for you.
Yeah. And we're not saying that that's against anyone. It's usually not. It usually includes.
100%. 100%. Yeah, it's just if it's not working for you, if you're judging yourself when you're not doing those things, then
Yeah.
maybe have a look at that and go, okay, so what would actually work for me here?
Yeah. That's what, my God, that's huge. Like that's with everything. That is just, I think I remember one of this, I read one of, I don't even remember what article or what blog post of yours, but I remember I just stepped into the tools of access consciousness, stumbled over them, or they found me literally, because I was like, there's going to be more.
Yeah.
But I remember reading, and it was something about like your, like what you've decided is success for you and what if something else is like, because that made me really look and question everything that I was choosing and go, wow, like how much of what I'm choosing in life is not even something that I give a shit about. And so I had to really look at. I was like, I'm constantly failing at like this. Or I'd created a lot of it with lot of ease, but sort of but it invited me to really look at, and it still does. Like it's like a daily ask because it keeps changing, it keeps evolving into something different. But thank you for being you and being in the world and for creating everything that you create that we get to play with, because it was definitely something that I remember very distinctly. I don't remember the words, I don't remember the title of the article, but I remember it made me question all the things that I decided was success for me, and really start looking at what is it what is success for me. Like,
Yeah.
it is sometimes just talking to someone and not being in reaction, and having me being able to wake up with a smile. Like it's so, and with space of what's next. Um, so thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you for this conversation. There's so many nuggets in here, and I'm going to listen to it again. It's loaded. Anyone who
Well, thank you for
um,
having me here.
if there's one thing that you would like to leave everyone with, what would it be?
One thing that is kind of really up in my world that I'm, playing with is looking at those areas where you are so comfortable in your mindset. And it could be the comfort of, I could never do that. Start looking at those and just ask, okay, but if I could, I'm not saying I could, you don't need to convince yourself, you don't need to believe in anything, but if I could do that or have a bit of that, what would that be like? And what would I have to choose different? And that's been something that I've been playing with, and it's pretty cool.
I love it. Thank you. There are like these glasses that I've seen that are like, I'm going to get them. Okay. So, thank you. And where can people, would you have any classes? This will be launched, though we don't know the week, but where can people find you for more?
You can go to my website, divadiaz.com, or accessconsciousness.com/Diva Diaz. And I've got lots of stuff coming up, including a new membership where we get to look at, how do you actually become super abled in everything that you're choosing and doing in your life. So yeah, check it out. There's lots happening.
I love that. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Everyone. Thank you as well. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. More coming up soon.